techniques that is highly underutilized is the good old ball and chain, the Carolina rig. The Carolina rig presents a soft plastic in a weightless fashion, which makes it look extremely natural to the fish and also allows you to get a lot more bites. So today I want to go through the Sea Rig, but I also want to point out 5 big mistakes that a lot of anglers make with the Carolina rig, so stay tuned, it's going to be a good one. This video is brought to you by MONSTERBASS. MONSTERBASS is not your ordinary subscription lure box company. Their goal and their mission is to make you a better angler, which is exactly what I try to do with this YouTube channel. Not only does MONSTERBASS send you regionalized lures that work in your area of the country, but they also help you to learn new techniques. For instance, in April is Carolina Rig Month, and included in your MONSTERBASS subscription is going to be everything that you need in order to start fishing a Carolina rig, as well as this 20-page booklet that has guys like myself, Alex Rudd, and other guys telling you exactly how they go about fishing a Carolina rig. I just realized that's my fingers right there. Look, my fingers are holding my fingers. Look, same thing. Golly, I got dirty fingernails. There's a lot of subscription lure services out there, but MONSTERBASS is the one that I choose. And I'm gonna leave a link for MONSTERBASS down below in the description. So if you're interested, click on that link and sign up today. The first mistake that a lot of anglers make when fishing a Carolina rig is assuming that a Carolina rig is only meant for deep water. For the most part, when you hear a lot of guys talk about fishing a Carolina rig, they're talking about fishing it offshore. And while it is a great technique, while you are fishing in deep water, this technique can also be used in very shallow water. As a matter of fact, a few years ago, I was actually fishing a Bassmaster Open on Ross Barnett Reservoir in Mississippi, and the guy that won that event, he was actually using a Carolina rig in like 2 feet of water. In that event, he was targeting old pad stems, and he was simply dragging that Carolina rig through those pad stems, and that was the way he was catching all of his fish. What makes a Carolina rig so effective is like what I talked about in the intro of this video. It allows you to present a lure in a weightless fashion. And when you're fishing a lure that is weightless like that, it just looks extremely natural to a fish. This is one of the reasons why a wacky rig, a Cinco, gets so many bites and you catch so many bass on them, is because most of the time you are fishing that wacky rig weightless. And a Carolina rig, whether you fish it in deep water or in shallow water, does the same thing. It allows you to fish that bait in a weightless manner. Now, the big thing with using a Carolina rig is that you can fish that bait a little bit faster. If you're fishing a weightless Cinco out there, it's a little bit more of a tedious process of casting that bait out, letting it sink down, working it really slow. But with that Carolina rig and with that weight, you can drag it fairly quick across the bottom, but you're still presenting that lure, that soft plastic, in a weightless manner. Now, when I am fishing in shallow water, I'm simply gonna downsize the weight that I use to something like a 1/4 ounce or a 3/8 ounce or maybe even a 1/2 ounce. But if I am fishing that bait offshore, say I'm fishing it in 10, 15, or 20 foot of water, that's typically when I'm gonna step up to that 1 ounce weight that really allows me to cover a lot of water very quickly. Now, speaking of fishing that 1 ounce weight, that actually brings me to mistake number 2, which is protect your knot better. The reason why you wanna protect your knot with a Carolina rig is that knot is going to take a lot of abuse from that 1 ounce weight, and the knot is also where most breakoffs occur. Growing up, reading different Bassmaster articles, watching different videos, we're all kind of taught how to put together a Carolina rig. You have your weight, you have your bead, and you have your swivel, and sometimes you have different clackers and other things associated with it. But what I was always taught growing up was that the bead was there to make noise and also to protect your knot from that heavy weight. Now, I'm going to be real honest with you, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense in my mind, because a bead, most of the time they're made out of glass, sometimes plastic, but if you have a 1 ounce weight hitting that bead, it's gonna put a lot of pressure on that knot still. And so I'm gonna show you a really simple trick that can help protect that knot. So in order to rig this up, I'm gonna do everything the same. I'm gonna add my weight, I'm gonna add my bead, but the next step before I tie my knot, I'm simply just gonna slip a bobber stopper on there. That bobber stopper is kind of made out of a rubber rubber-like material, and it really helps protect that knot from the abuse that it's gonna take from that Carolina rig. This is really simple. It doesn't affect anything with your Carolina rig, and it will help you to not break off and put more fish in the boat. The next mistake that a lot of anglers make when fishing that Carolina rig is that they use too heavy of a hook. Now, when I'm talking about the heaviness of a hook, I'm actually talking about the diameter of that hook. Sometimes I see guys using a Carolina rig with a kind of a heavy wire hook. And when you're casting a Carolina rig, especially if you're casting it a long distance, maybe across the point, maybe across the hump, when you go to set the hook on a fish, you know, I'm typically using fluorocarbon line. I'm using a 20-pound main line and usually like a 12 to 15-pound leader. And if you're setting the hook at a distance, sometimes with that thicker, bigger hook, you're just not gonna penetrate past the barb into that fish's mouth, and therefore you're going to lose a lot of fish. I actually first found this out while I was fishing for smallmouth one time with a Carolina rig. I kept losing smallmouth because I was kind of using a thicker gauge hook, and when I stepped down to kind of a medium wire hook, I started landing a lot more fish because that barb would simply penetrate that fish's mouth and I would hook them and I would hold them. So when you're using that Carolina rig, just make sure that your hook is not too thick, that you're using kind of a medium wire hook. Now, a lot of times I like something like a 3/0 hook or a 4/0 hook with my Carolina rig. I use a lot of creature baits and crawl baits, and that 3 or 4/0 hook is gonna work perfect for that creature bait. Now, if you're using an EWG style hook, one thing that I do recommend is bending that hook out just a little bit. That will also help you with hooking up with more fish on the Carolina rig. The fourth mistake a lot of anglers make with their sea rig is that they don't pay attention to that leader length. Sometimes I have found that longer leaders will really help you to get more bites versus shorter leaders. Now, I really try not to complicate bass fishing, and I think that there's kind of an 80-20 rule with this. I think that 80% of the time you are fishing a sea rig, leader length probably doesn't matter a whole lot. You're probably not gonna get a lot more bites fishing a 2-foot leader versus a 4-foot leader. But if you're fishing around highly pressured bodies of water, I do believe that having a longer leader, a leader that is 4 foot plus in length, can actually help you to get a lot more bites. Now, although this is a little bit harder to cast, I think that getting that bait further away from that weight just helps that bait to look a little bit more natural on the bottom. And if you're fishing in a highly pressured body of water, having a bait that just looks more natural is going to get more bites. Most of the time when I tie up a leader, it's about 2.5, 3 foot in length. But anytime I am fishing around a pressured body of water, I will make sure that it is a longer leader. The fifth mistake a lot of guys make with the Carolina rig is assuming that this is a slow technique. I do believe that one of the best ways to actually fish the Carolina rig is by fishing it extremely slow. I think that sometimes the slower you fish it, the more bites that you can catch. But with that being said, you can actually cover a ton of water and fish a Carolina rig extremely fast. For instance, if you're fishing out on a point, if you use a heavier weight, like a 1 ounce weight, you can really drag that bait pretty quickly across the bottom until you kind of hit a rough patch. Maybe it's a patch of rocks or gravel or shell, and once you kind of get into that rough spot, that's when I like to slow things down. But really, until I start feeling what I like to feel down there, I'm gonna fish that bait pretty fast. Now, a lot of guys might sit there and say, well, why don't you just use a crankbait, something like that? And yes, that can work on some days, but other days you get out there and you're kind of dealing with slick, calm conditions where they might not bite that crankbait so well. So using your Carolina rig, fishing it extremely fast can help you to cover a lot of water, find those key areas that the bass are sitting, and then you can really clean up and catch a lot of them with that sea rig. Now, if you guys like this video, it's actually part of a series that I call the Stop Fishing series. And I'm gonna link that series of videos right here. So if you like this one, click on these videos and you can watch all of them in that series. Also, don't forget to check out Monster Bass. The link is in the description. I'll see you guys in the next video.